So imagine seating the primary architect of 20th century French philosophy across a dinner table from a massive pop star.
Right.
Like they're sitting right there in the middle of a glittering, sold-out stadium. And you suddenly realize they are speaking the exact same language.
It's quite a visual, yeah.
It really is. Today, for you, the listener, we are exploring a book that basically takes a sledgehammer to the walls,
Hmm.
separating high academic culture from, you know, the low culture of a 3-minute pop song.
Hmm.
We're talking about a wildly subversive, pseudo-academic text titled Style. Barthes meets Taylor Swift. And, I mean, just the premise alone is enough to give you a bit of intellectual whiplash.
It truly is. When you first encounter this premise, the immediate instinct is just, well, cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, I was like,
Because we are so conditioned to quarantine these two worlds, you have Roland Barthes, the famously rigorous dissecting mastermind of structuralism and
right,
semiotics.
whose ideas are usually, like, whispered in these hallowed, dusty university halls.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you have Taylor Swift, whose stadium anthems are belted out by millions of teenagers,
Yeah.
and the author of this book, who, remarkably, writes under the pseudonym Eur, which translates from Taiwanese Mandarin as mouse-colored cat.
I love that name so much.
It's great. This author is orchestrating what is essentially an intellectual blind date between these two
I
titans.
cannot get over that pseudonym, honestly.
Yeah,
Mouse-colored cat. It's like brilliant camouflage.
he really
It's
is.
a predator taking on the exact shade of its prey so it can sneak up on you. And that's exactly what this book does. It sneaks up on you.
Completely.
Because at first glance, treating a song about a white t-shirt and red lipstick as a rigorous philosophical thesis
Yeah.
sounds like an elaborate joke, but we really need to establish our mission for this deep dive right away.
Yes, setting the ground rules.
Right. We are not doing this to prove that Taylor Swift is secretly holed up in some dimly lit library, poring over French literary theory before she writes a chorus.
No.
And we are absolutely not delivering a dry, impenetrable academic lecture today.
Far from it. The goal of this exploration is to see what happens when the massive, uncontainable, stadium-level emotions of pop music collide with the surgical precision of philosophical analysis.
Yeah, that collision.
The author, our mouse-colored cat, makes a profoundly compelling case here. They argue that the existential questions haunting libraries for centuries, questions about identity, the nature of memory, how we perform love, are the exact same questions teenagers are screaming at the top of their lungs on a Friday night.
Okay, let's unpack this from the very beginning, starting with the book's preface, because the author anticipates our exact reaction.
Oh, they know.
They know. You're probably smirking right now. The text explicitly addresses this, noting that for serious people, pairing a pop star with a philosopher is ridiculous.
Right.
But then the author turns the mirror around and asks us, well, why does it make us smirk? What is the actual mechanism behind that snobbery?
To answer that, the text introduces the sociological framework of Pierre Bourdieu, specifically drawing from his landmark work distinction.
Okay, let's get into Bourdieu.
So, Bourdieu spent his career analyzing how society sorts itself. And his conclusion about culture is honestly devastating to our collective ego.
It really hurts. Yeah.
We generally like to believe that the divide between high culture, your avant-garde literature, classical symphonies, and low culture like pop music or reality TV is based on inherent intellectual depth.
Right, we assume high culture is complex and low culture is simplistic.
Exactly. But Bourdieu says that's a complete illusion. It's not about the actual complexity of the art itself.
It's not about the art at all. It's about the friction, right? The friction of access.
Precisely. Bourdieu argues that cultural tastes are primarily a mechanism for social sorting. Elites use high culture as a boundary line to protect their status.
Huh.
If a piece of culture requires a university degree, fluency in dense jargon, and, excessive leisure time to understand, it contains a high degree of friction.
Which keeps people out.
That friction keeps the masses out. Therefore, consuming that culture becomes a status symbol. Low culture, on the other hand, is defined by its lack of friction.
Right, it's accessible.
It circulates widely, and because everyone can access it, it loses its value as an exclusive social signal.
This is such a crucial point, and I want you, the listener, to really visualize how this plays out in real life. Think about fashion for a second.
That's a perfect analogy.
Imagine someone wearing a threadbare, incredibly obscure vintage t-shirt from some 1970s underground prog rock band that played maybe 3 shows.
Right.
In certain circles, that shirt makes you unequivocally cool. Why? Because it demonstrates niche knowledge, It proves you have the time and the cultural capital to dig through the crates.
Exactly.
Now, picture someone wearing a brand new mass-produced concert tee from a current pop star who plays to 70,000 people a night. That person is often dismissed as basic.
Even though it's the exact same physical cotton, the act of supporting a musician by wearing their merchandise is mechanically identical.
Yes, the mechanism is absolutely identical. But one requires friction to acquire, and the other is ubiquitous.
Right.
So the academic elite view pop culture with intense suspicion, not because the ideas within it are necessarily shallow, but simply because it spreads too efficiently.
If everyone gets it, it cannot be used to elevate the elite above everyone else. The book argues we are deeply conditioned to ignore philosophy the moment it has a catchy hook.
And that brings us to the subversive nature of what the author is attempting here. Like, is it possible that the greatest philosophical truths of our era aren't hidden in dense German texts, but are just hiding in plain sight on the radio?
The text argues that clarifying complex ideas isn't a betrayal of the philosophy itself.
But I'm struggling with a potential leap here, I have to ask.
Go ahead.
Does the book actually argue that Taylor Swift is sitting down with the intent of writing philosophy?
Mm-hmm.
Or is the argument just that we are applying philosophy to a catchy hook after the fact?
It's a fair question.
Because projecting meaning onto something that wasn't meant to be deep feels like we're just playing a sort of intellectual parlor game, you know?
That is the exact tension the book navigates. It avoids declaring that she is consciously writing a philosophical treatise, although it teases that idea later.
Right.
What's fascinating here is the book's stance on the act of translation itself. The author writes, "To simplify is to flatten. To translate is to risk. And risk, unlike prestige, is democratic."
Wow, risk is democratic.
That phrasing is really striking.
It really is. It means that leaving philosophy in the ivory tower is safe. It maintains prestige. Taking those high-minded concepts, how we perceive time, how we construct our identities, and translating them into a 3-minute pop song is an enormous risk.
Because it risks being misunderstood.
Exactly. Misunderstood, called shallow, dismissed by the critics. But that very risk is what allows everyone, regardless of their educational background, to participate in the conversation.
Wow. The challenge posed to you, the listener, is to interrogate your own biases here. Why do we demand that our philosophical ghosts speak exclusively in thick, impenetrable jargon?
It really makes me wonder if, like, a truth about the devastation of heartbreak is somehow more valid if it takes 400 pages of phenomenological theory to articulate it.
Rather than a single, perfectly crafted bridge in a pop song.
Exactly. It really sets the stage for the next part of the book, which actually abandons the traditional academic format entirely.
Yes, the foreword.
The author gives us a foreword, but they explicitly label it as apocryphal. It is a complete work of fiction.
Right.
It is a foreword imagined by the mouse-colored cat, placed directly into the mouth of a fictionalized Taylor Swift.
And this apocryphal device serves a profound purpose. The fictional Taylor writes intimately about being awake at 2 a.m., trapped in that liminal space somewhere between noise and silence.
She describes spending half her life trying to capture lightning in a bottle.
Sitting on the floor in pajamas, scribbling secrets in spiral notebooks, she talks about the strange physics of human emotion.
Yeah, why time accelerates when you are falling in love, and why it seems to stop dead, just freezing you in place when your heart breaks.
She also addresses the long history of criticism directed at her. The fictional Taylor writes, "For years I was told that my feelings were too much, too loud, too frequent, too feminine."
She mentions the critics who dismissed her as just a girl writing trivial breakup songs. But then the text delivers this absolute gut punch of a line.
Oh, I know the one.
She says, as if adolescence wasn't the time when you feel the world with the violence of a summer storm.
That phrase, the violence of a summer storm, does something vital here. It takes teenage emotion, which our culture usually treats as a punchline, and elevates it to something phenomenological.
Let's pause and define that, actually. Because phenomenological is one of those heavy academic words that can really lose people.
Absolutely. Phenomenology, in philosophy, is the study of conscious experience from the subjective, first-person point of view. It's not just observing that someone is sad. It is the study of how sadness physically alters their reality.
Right, their actual perception of the world.
Exactly. When a teenager is waiting for a text message from someone they love and that text doesn't come, phenomenology says we shouldn't just look at that as a minor social disappointment.
Because to the teenager, it's not minor at all.
To the teenager, the silence of the phone literally alters the gravity of the room. It changes how they perceive time. The world itself becomes heavy and hostile.
So, when the apocryphal tailor asks, why does the memory of a scarf left in a drawer weigh more heavily than an entire decade? Which, by the way, is a brilliant nod to her song, All Too Well, for the fans listening. She is asking a deeply phenomenological question.
Yes, she is.
How does an inanimate object, like a simple piece of knitted wool, absorb so much emotional mass that it outweighs 10 years of normal life?
Precisely. And the book insists that this intensity is not a sign of immaturity. It's not a lack of perspective. The author uses this apocryphal voice to completely reframe adolescence. We culturally diminish girls' problems. But the core philosophical project of this book is to realize that these so-called trivial problems are actually the foundational crises of human existence.
The apocryphal tailor writes, your tears are ink, your doubts are philosophy.
It's radically validating. It says the sleepless night you spent agonizing over whether someone truly perceived you or just a version of you they invented is the exact same sleepless night Jean-Paul Sartre had.
When he was writing about the gaze of the other.
Exactly. The feeling is identical. The academic merely found a less accessible vocabulary for it.
The text even jokes about this, doesn't it? Having the fictional tailor casually drop that she was secretly debating Plato about the nature of illusion.
And that apparently Kant loved the bridge in Cruel Summer.
Which is just the image of Immanuel Kant, this rigid 18th century Prussian philosopher headbanging to Cruel Summer, is wonderfully absurd.
It is, but it highlights the mechanism of what we're talking about. Kant is famous for the categorical imperative.
Right, the idea that you should only act according to a rule that you would want to become a universal law for everyone.
Yes. When a pop star writes a hyper-specific lyric about a fleeting, agonizing moment of a summer romance, and 70 million people sing it back because it perfectly describes their own lives, she has essentially achieved a universal law of emotion.
Wow. She has taken the hyper-specific and made it universally categorical.
She really has.
Which brings us to the man who is actually going to help us decode all of this.
Right.
We've set up the pop star, so now we need to meet the watchmaker.
Roland Barthes.
Right. The book pivots to introduce Roland Barthes. And the biographical sketch provided in the text is deeply revealing about how his mind worked.
Definitely. Barthes was born in 1915 in Cherbourg, France. The author highlights a defining tragedy of his early life. His father was killed in naval combat during the First World War when Barthes was barely a year old.
Oh,
the text suggests this is an almost poetic origin story for a future thinker of science. His conscious life began with an absence, a blank space where a father should be, a void that demanded interpretation.
And his body betrayed him early on as well, didn't it?
Right.
He contracted tuberculosis.
Yes, and he spent years isolated in a sanatorium. The text describes how, during those years of forced stillness and isolation, he read voraciously. And when he eventually emerged into the world, he had developed this incredible, piercing superpower. He didn't just look at society, he dismantled it.
The book compares him to a watchmaker, which I thought was so apt. Like if you hand an ordinary personal watch, they tell you the time.
But if you hand Barthes a watch, he takes the back off to expose the gears, the springs, the tension. He wanted to see the hidden mechanics that make the hands move.
This drive to expose the hidden mechanics birthed the field he is most famous for popularizing, which is semiotics.
Right.
Let's break semiotics down for the listener. Because it sounds intimidating, but it's actually a very intuitive way of looking at the world once it clicks.
Semiotics is, at its core, the study of signs and symbols and how we use them to create meaning.
Okay.
In semiotics, a sign is anything that communicates a meaning that is not the sign itself to the interpreter. It is divided into two parts. The signifier, the physical thing itself, like the sound of a word or an object, and the signified.
Which is the mental concept that the physical thing represents.
Yeah, exactly.
So just to give a really basic example, a red octagon on the side of the road is the signifier. The concept of you must stop your car immediately is the signified. Together they make the sign.
Perfectly stated. But Barthes took this beyond traffic signs. In his legendary book Mythologies, he turned this analytical lens onto the mundane, everyday world.
Yeah, he wrote essays dissecting professional wrestling matches, right?
Wrestling matches, the cultural meaning of a plate of steak and fries, the sleek design of the new Citroen car, and even the imagery in pasta commercials.
Pasta commercials, amazing.
He argued that beneath every ordinary object and interaction, there is a hidden system of signs that speaks for us, usually without our conscious knowledge.
He was absolutely obsessed with exposing what he called naturalness.
Yes.
Barthes believed that whenever society presents something as just the way things are or perfectly natural, it is almost always a disguise. And the most effective disguise is the one that successfully passes for natural.
And the book gives us a brilliant example that bridges his world with Taylor Swift's, the white t-shirt.
Okay, yes. Let's talk about the white t-shirt.
The white t-shirt is a masterclass in semiotics. A plain white cotton t-shirt seems like a zero-degree garment. It seems devoid of meaning. It's just fabric.
But Barthes, and by extension our author, argues that a white t-shirt is never just a white t-shirt. It is a highly potent signifier.
When you put on a white t-shirt, you weren't just covering your torso. You were wrapping yourself in a very specific, inherited mythology.
Right. It carries the ghost of James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause.
It signifies a kind of effortless, domesticated rebellion. You are putting on a myth of American coolness. It feels natural, but it is entirely constructed by decades of cinema and advertising.
So once you understand this, you can never look at a shop window innocently again. You stop seeing clothes and start seeing arguments, ideologies, and historical references.
Exactly. But Barthes didn't just destabilize our relationship with objects. He fundamentally destabilized our relationship with art itself through his most famous essay.
The death of the author.
Yes.
This is a concept that shakes the foundations of how we usually consume media, because we usually care deeply about what the creator intended.
We do. We obsess over it. But Barthes argued that the meaning of a text, whether it's a novel, a poem, or a pop song, does not belong to the person who created it. The author's biographical background, their personal intentions, who they were thinking about when they wrote it. Barthes says all of that is completely irrelevant once the work is published.
The author dies so that the reader can be born.
The true locus of meaning is in the destination, the reader, not the origin.
Okay, here is where it gets incredibly tense and fascinating in the context of this deep dive. Because the author of our source text sets up a high-speed, head-on collision between Barthes' death of the author and Taylor Swift's entire modus operandi.
It's brilliant.
In the epigraph of the book, there is a real quote from Taylor Swift given to the Washington Post in October 2022. She states, "When I was 15 and putting together my first album, I decided to encode the lyrics with hidden messages."
It is the ultimate paradox. You have Barthes, the philosopher who loudly declared that the author is dead and their intentions don't matter, sitting across the table from a pop star who's built a multi-billion-dollar global empire on the exact opposite premise.
Yeah, she is an author who is hyper-alive. She's hyper-vigilant, constantly reminding her audience that she is the mastermind, leaving highly intentional breadcrumbs for them to decipher.
Which is why this pairing is so wild.
But I really need to push back here. How can the book possibly reconcile this? If Taylor is actively, meticulously encoding her lyrics with specific autobiographical details, like, capitalizing certain letters in a CD booklet to spell out a name, how can Barthes' theory possibly apply to her?
It seems like it shouldn't work.
Right, it feels like her very existence disproves his thesis. She absolutely refuses to die as the author.
It seems like a fatal contradiction, but the book resolves it by looking at the pure mechanical scale of her audience.
Okay, scale. Walk me through that.
The author argues that even if Taylor Swift encodes a message with sniper-like precision, the moment that song is released to 70 million fans, a mathematical shift occurs. She fundamentally loses control of the narrative.
How does she lose control if everyone knows she wrote it about a specific person, though?
Because of the mechanism of reception. Imagine she writes a song detailing a specific argument she had in New York. She releases it. Suddenly, a teenager in a small town in Ohio listens to it after their own devastating breakup. That teenager attaches the melody, the lyrics, the emotional swell of the bridge entirely to their own ex-partner. They cry in their car thinking about their life, not Taylor's life.
Wow. Okay, I see it.
When 70 million people do that simultaneously, the original intent is buried under an avalanche of localized personal meanings. The sheer volume of the audience's emotional projection dilutes the author's original intent into statistical irrelevance.
So the intention might be fiercely alive in Taylor's mind, but the reception becomes the dominant reality. The fans manufacture the meaning.
That is exactly it.
That makes perfect sense. The song mathematically belongs more to the millions of people applying it to their own heartbreak than it does to the one person who wrote it.
And this mechanic ties directly into another of Barthes' major works that the book leans on heavily, A Lover's Discourse. Fragments.
Oh, this part is amazing.
In this work, Barthes breaks the experience of love down into recognizable figures, the agony of waiting for a phone call, the sting of jealousy, the grand declaration of affection. And his most devastating, ego-bruising argument is that every single gesture of love is a quotation.
It is a profoundly humbling concept to sit with. Like, Barthes argues that when you look deeply into someone's eyes and say, I love you, you are not inventing that moment.
No, you're really.
You are not saying it for the first time. You are always inevitably quoting it.
You are.
Where are we quoting it from, though? Just everywhere.
We are quoting the accumulated cultural database of romance. We are quoting every romantic comedy we've ever seen, every novel we've read, every pop song we've absorbed since childhood.
Wow.
Our brains are essentially pre-programmed with romantic software. When we meet someone who triggers the right biological response, we just execute the program, we run the script.
So the feeling of love in your chest is entirely real, like the elevated heart rate, the adrenaline, but the form we use to express that feeling has already been written by others.
Yes, we inherit the language of romance, we do not invent it.
We are all actors who have completely forgotten we are holding a script. We think we are improvising, but we are just hitting our marks.
That's a bit eerie.
It is. Before we apply this to a specific song, the text notes the tragic, deeply ironic way Roland Barthes died. In 1980, while walking in Paris, he was struck by a laundry van.
The author of our book calls it an absurd death for a man who had spent his life analyzing signs.
It is a dark, poignant irony. The man who could decode the most complex mythologies of the modern world, who could read the hidden meaning in a photograph or a plate of food, failed to read the most literal, urgent sign of an oncoming van.
But his legacy remains intact. He taught us that nothing is innocent anymore, especially not the things that appear simple.
Which brings us to the core application of the book's argument. The mouse-colored cat takes all of this heavy, mid-century French philosophy, takes the watchmaker's tools, and applies them directly to the song's style from Taylor Swift's 1989 era.
It's the perfect song for this.
Let's look at the specific visual signifiers the text analyzes.
Yeah.
The lyrics of the song famously describe a couple caught in a recurring loop. He has the James Dean daydream look in his eye and is wearing a white t-shirt.
Right.
She has the red lip classic thing that you like. The book places this directly under Barthes' semiotic microscope. It argues that the white t-shirt is actively quoting the James Dean myth of untamed youth.
And the red lip is speaking a dead language of classic, untouchable Hollywood glamour.
Exactly. So the author argues that in the narrative of this song, this couple isn't actually returning to each other out of a deep, soulful, emotional loyalty.
No. They aren't drawn together by a profound meeting of the minds. They are returning to each other because of visual consistency.
Visual consistency, meaning they just look right together.
Exactly. The couple becomes a fashion accessory to one another. The text states this with incredible brutal poetry. Coolness embalms feelings. The Ihon replaces intimacy.
Coolness embalms feelings. I see where you're going, but I have to step in and push back on behalf of every listener who views style as a great, albeit toxic, romance.
Sure.
Because this analysis sounds incredibly bleak. Is this book actually arguing that this couple doesn't genuinely care for each other? Does it completely strip away their human agency, suggesting there is zero real affection, and they only keep getting back together because they look aesthetically pleasing on a Polaroid?
It feels incredibly cynical at first glance, doesn't it?
Yeah, super cynical.
But if we look closer at how Barthes' framework operates, it's not quite that emotionally barren. He isn't saying the emotion is entirely fake. He's saying that the vehicle for the emotion has been commodified.
Okay, so the vehicle is what matters.
Yes. The emotion can only be expressed, and more importantly, it can only be validated through the image.
So the feeling might be real, but it has no vocabulary outside of the aesthetic.
Right. The book says, a love that is too photogenic smells of formaldehyde.
Ugh, what a line.
They love each other, but they love each other precisely as they pose for eternity. The image precedes the intimacy. Taylor isn't just writing a catchy song about two incredibly attractive people who can't quit each other.
She is acting as the semiotician.
She is exposing the mechanics of a modern myth. She is showing us that in the contemporary world, a relationship often functions primarily as a system of signs.
Right. If the image works, if the white t-shirt and the red lip match perfectly, the relationship feels correct to the participants.
Yeah.
Even if the underlying emotional reality is a complete disaster.
Exactly.
That is a terrifyingly accurate description of modern dating, which the book explores brilliantly by shifting formats. It sets up a dialogue, like a literal dinner conversation between two archetypes, to debate this very point.
The snob and the Swiftie.
Right. It's a very clever use of the classic Platonic dialogue format, just updated for 21st century pop culture.
The snob takes the predictable traditionalist route. The snob argues that style is an inherently superficial song. They say that getting back together with someone just because you are photogenic together is a sign of moral and emotional weakness. It's a relapse.
It's not a great romance, it's a failure of growth.
Exactly. The snob accuses the song of reducing the profound mystery of love to an advertising campaign for a lifestyle brand.
And the Swiftie steps up and completely dismantles the snob's argument using Roland Barthes' own tools. The Swiftie points out that Barthes spent his entire life proving that aesthetics are never just superficial.
A white t-shirt is never just woven cotton, it is a manifesto.
A red lip is never just pigment, it's armor. The Swiftie argues that Taylor isn't creating this aesthetic trap by accident. She is illuminating the fact that modern love works exactly like a system of signs.
The Swiftie delivers the conceptual knockout punch by quoting Barthes' A Lover's Discourse. If every gesture of love is a quotation, as Barthes claims, then Taylor is fully aware of her role as a quoter.
Instead of pretending her love is entirely original, pure, and unprecedented in the history of the universe, which is the great lie of romanticism, she embraces the quotation.
When she sings, "We never go out of style," the Swiftie points out that this is a slogan, not a confession.
Right. And in a world where everything has been reduced to a sign, an image that works flawlessly is actually more powerful and more honest than a stuttering, messy, raw feeling that has no legible form.
The snob pushes back against this, saying, if love is just a sign, if it's just a slogan and an image, then nothing real remains. That's disenchanting. That ruins the magic.
And this is the exact moment I want to pause and ask you, the listener. Which side of this dinner table are you sitting on right now?
It's a tough choice.
Does knowing that you are just quoting love ruin the magic for you?
Yeah?
Does it make your relationships feel less special to think that the way you look at your partner across a crowded room, the way you hold hands in the car, the specific cadence of your arguments is all inherited software running in the background?
Or does it take the pressure off?
That is the pivotal question.
And the Swiftie's ultimate conclusion is that it takes the pressure off. It is deeply liberating. The Swiftie says, the day you accept that love is a language and not magic, you stop blaming the other person for not speaking yours.
Oh, that is so good. You stop blaming the other person for not speaking yours because you realize you were just operating with different dictionaries.
Exactly. Barthes didn't kill romanticism. He simply translated its mechanics. And Taylor Swift does the exact same thing on a massive scale.
She transforms the messy, chaotic, often unnameable reality of a couple into a clean, recognizable visual grammar so that everyone in the stadium can speak it fluently.
It's like finding out that a magic trick is just an illusion. For a second, you're disappointed, but then when you realize how intricate the mechanics of the illusion are, you actually appreciate the magician's skill even more than when you thought it was real magic.
That's a great way to put it. But the author doesn't stop at a philosophical dinner party debate. They decide to push the theory to its absolute absurd limit.
Oh,
The book takes a sharp left turn into clinical satire, and it is simultaneously hilarious and utterly brutal.
we are introduced to a fictional academic named Professor Malik Merriwell, who represents an organization called the Transnational Observatory of Effective Semiotics and Algorithmic Desire, or wonderfully, TOASAD.
TOASAD. I love it. It sounds like a dystopian bureaucratic government agency whose sole purpose is to ruthlessly audit your Hinge profile and your Instagram grid.
It really does. Professor Merriwell takes the stage to present a recent meta-analysis based on a data set of 27,463 Instagram posts,
Wow.
all tagged with hashtags like #UpGoals, #Timeless, and #Forever. And his findings are meticulously designed to completely shatter any remaining romantic illusions we might have about how we perform relationships in the digital age.
The professor introduces a new metric to the scientific community, the High Visual Recurrence Index, or HVRI.
Let's unpack HVRI because it is the most savage, surgically precise takedown of modern influencer culture I have ever encountered.
Yes, please.
Professor Merriwell defines HVRI as the frequency with which a couple reproduces a stable aesthetic configuration that an untrained observer can recognize within 0.8 seconds.
In plain English, he is measuring how consistently a couple looks like their brand.
Yes, and Merriwell states the governing law of this metric. If it looks right, it lasts. If it lasts, it is assumed to be right.
The satire peaks when he highlights the findings of a specific demographic in his study, subject cluster D9. The researchers internally designate this group as the monochrome devotion cohort.
I had to put the book down and laugh when I read this part.
Same. The monochrome devotion cohort is defined as couples who exhibit a highly consistent preference for neutral color palettes, beiges, creams, oatmeals, vintage linen textures, and strategically disheveled hair.
Listener, you know exactly who this is. It is literally every aesthetically curated, overly calm, beige and linen couple constantly popping up on your social media feed.
Staring pensively into the distance while holding artisanal coffees.
We all recognize the format immediately, but the data point that Merriwell presents about this cohort is the true philosophical stinger.
Yeah.
He notes that this specific cohort achieved a 147% increase in perceived relational authenticity from their audience, despite the fact that in 68% of the cases studied, the couples themselves reported experiencing moderate to severe emotional ambiguity in private.
Let the mechanics of that sink in. The audience looking at them processes the visual stability, the matching beige linen, the perfect lighting, and the human brain, which is inherently lazy and loves pattern recognition, conflates that visual stability with emotional truth.
The audience thinks, wow, they were the most authentic, grounded couple in the world.
Meanwhile, the couples themselves are highly ambivalent, unsure of their feelings, and emotionally messy behind closed doors.
Exactly.
So I have to ask, according to this fictional professor and the other satirical voice in the text, a character named Gaston Blunder, are they arguing that in the modern world, you don't actually maintain a relationship anymore, you just maintain its legibility?
Yes. The text makes this explicit. It says, you do not maintain a relationship, you maintain legibility. You don't find the one, you find the format.
Right. The white t-shirt and the red lipper, the beige linen and the artisanal coffee are not just garments or props. They are semiotic anchors.
They stabilize the relationship within a culturally validated framework. They give the relationship a shape that society can easily digest and approve of.
Gaston Blunder sums up this bleak reality perfectly. He says, you think you're in love, but actually, you're just matching an Instagram template. Boom. 27,000 couples did the exact same thing.
He points out that your internal feelings will naturally go up and down. Human emotion is volatile, but your aesthetic, if you curate it well, is perfectly stable. That's why the relationship survives.
Blunder tells us you didn't find the one, you found the format.
And here's the terrifying accuracy of this concept for modern dating. The professor issues a warning. He says that if you deviate from your format, if you have a sudden moment of tragic originality and step outside the acceptable parameters of your aesthetic coherence, you will lose recognition.
The image disappears.
And for many people operating in this digital landscape, losing the external societal recognition of the relationship is practically equivalent to losing the relationship itself.
The image isn't just the surface anymore. It has become the infrastructure. If the infrastructure collapses, the love collapses with it.
It is a breathtaking deconstruction. The author has taken love, dismantled it on the table, shown us the gears, and basically told us we are all just unwitting actors running a script inside a perfectly lit Instagram template.
Where do we go from here, though? Does the book offer a way out, or does it just leave us in this cynical void?
Well, it doesn't leave us there. It takes us on a ride, literally.
Right, the taxi ride. The book shifts gears again and describes an unlikely, highly cinematic taxi ride. It's an Uber ride, to be precise, and the text specifies that it lasts exactly 7.4 kilometers.
The author sets the scene with incredible atmospheric detail. It's raining in the city, the neon lights are blurring on the wet asphalt.
Taylor Swift is sitting in the back seat, staring down, scrolling silently through endless images of herself on her phone.
Roland Barthes is sitting right next to her, but he's not looking at her face. He's watching her reflection in the dark, rain-streaked window.
The author adds a brilliant psychological note here, stating that Barthes is more interested in the image than in the person, which is perfectly on brand for the father of semiotics.
And they engage in this incredibly tense, terse dialogue over the sound of the rain. Taylor speaks first, quoting her own song. She says, "We never go out of style."
Barthes doesn't miss a beat. He replies, "Of course not."
Taylor senses his detachment and asks, "You don't believe me?"
And Barthes delivers this killer line, looking at her reflection. "I believe the image. That's enough."
That short exchange captures the entire theoretical framework of the book in a few sparse sentences.
Taylor feels the emptiness of the repetition. She feels the anxiety that they are just quoting a format. Barthes confirms her worst fear. Always.
But she wants a way out of the format. She wants the feeling to be truly, uniquely, messily hers. She says, "Because I'd like it to be mine."
And Barthes replies with something that is both devastating and strangely comforting. He says, "It is yours, but only because you repeat it well."
I want to linger on the mechanics of that statement. It is yours, but only because you repeat it well.
It validates the reality of the feeling while simultaneously acknowledging the complete artifice of the format.
You only own the emotion because you have mastered the performance of it. You wear the white t-shirt so confidently that you convince yourself you invented the concept of coolness.
But then, the philosophical grounds shift entirely. The car stops at a red light. The driver reaches up and adjusts the rearview mirror, making eye contact.
And the text reveals the identity of the Uber driver. It is the ancient philosopher Heraclitus.
This is a breathtaking philosophical joke, and it requires a bit of context to fully appreciate the magnitude of the rug pull the author just executed.
Heraclitus is a pre-Socratic Greek philosopher whose entire worldview is based on the doctrine of universal flux. His most famous, enduring concept is the river analogy.
He famously stated that you cannot step into the same river twice.
Because the river is constantly flowing, the water you stepped in a second ago is gone, replaced by new water.
Yes, and crucially, you are not the same person either. You have aged a second, your cells have changed, your perspective has shifted. Therefore, the river is not the same river, and you are not the same man.
Heraclitus represents the idea that absolutely nothing in the universe is static. Everything is in a state of constant, unrepeatable change. Pantere, everything flows.
So Heraclitus sits there in the driver's seat, his eyes meeting theirs in the mirror. He says absolutely nothing, but the text notes the heavy, silent implication filling the car. Nothing repeats.
This is the genius of the mouse-colored cat's world building.
I mean, the back of the book lists other fictional titles in this Philo Swift collection that I desperately wish were real. Gilles Deleuze paired with All Too Well, Machiavelli analyzing Getaway Car, Jean Baudrillard deconstructing Opalite, Hannah Arendt grappling with champagne problems.
It is a massive intellectual playground.
But what is the specific significance of putting Heraclitus in the driver's seat of this specific car, interrupting this specific conversation?
It creates a massive unresolved tension. It exposes the limits of Barthes' theory.
Right.
Barthes, sitting in the back seat, insists that love is an endless, static repetition of inherited signs. You put on the white t-shirt today just as James Dean did decades ago, and just as someone will 50 years from now.
The sign repeats perfectly. The image is eternal.
But Heraclitus driving the car represents the fundamental cosmic irony that contradicts Barthes. Heraclitus is there to say, yes, the image might repeat, but the reality beneath it is in constant, chaotic flux.
I see where you're going. So you can put on the white t-shirt twice. You can break up and get back together, matching the visual format perfectly.
But the second time you wear the shirt, you are older. You have the memory of the breakup. The innocence is gone.
The signifier remains identical, but the signified, the actual human being wearing it, has irrevocably changed.
Exactly. The human brain is caught between these two immense forces. We desperately cling to the repetition of signs. We want the comfort of the white t-shirt. We want the format. We want to believe we never go out of style because it gives us an illusion of permanence.
We use aesthetics to try and freeze time.
But Heraclitus is driving the car, the meter is running, and time refuses to freeze.
The author is playing multi-dimensional chess with these philosophical concepts. They construct this elaborate, claustrophobic Barthesian cage of semiotics and endless quotation, convincing us that everything is a repeated sign.
And then at the very last second, they quietly put the philosopher of constant, unrepeatable change behind the steering wheel. They aren't out of the car yet.
The tension between the image that desperately tries to repeat and the time that brutally refuses to repeat is left entirely unresolved. It is a brilliant way to leave the reader suspended.
It leaves you breathless. You feel the claustrophobia of the image and the vertigo of time passing all at once.
But the book has one final, essential point to make, and it brings us out of the theoretical Uber ride in the rain and sends us crashing violently into our very real, present-day technological reality.
The afterword.
Yes. The book ends with an afterword titled Antidote to Algorithmic Inbreeding. The author drops the satire, steps out from behind the curtain, and addresses the actual creation of the book we just read.
It's a very raw, jarring shift in tone. The author openly admits that this book, this bizarre, intricate layering of pop music and French theory, would have been materially impossible to produce without the use of large language models, or AI.
They refer to these AI systems with a beautifully derisive phrase, Stochastic parrots of infinity that read everything and understand nothing.
Stochastic parrots is such an evocative term. It perfectly describes how these models work. They don't think, they just use probability stochastic math to predict the next most likely word in a sequence based on the massive amounts of text they've consumed.
They are parroting patterns. But rather than apologizing for using AI, the author frames their use of it as the affirmation of a new kind of human role, the data sovereign.
To explain the stakes of this, the author contrasts our current technological crisis with the past. They note that when digital image processing first emerged, say in the late 1980s or 90s, the big revolutionary promise was zero generation loss.
Right. If you photocopied a physical piece of paper, the copy got slightly blurrier. If you copied the copy, it got worse. But with digital files, you could make a copy of a copy of a copy a billion times, and the pixels would remain absolutely pristine.
The fidelity was infinite.
Exactly. The digital promise was perfect preservation. But the author argues that today, in the era of generative AI, the danger isn't the physical degradation of the signal. The danger is the catastrophic degradation of meaning.
The author writes a chilling maxim for our time. The more we generate, the less we create.
Let's expand on the mechanics of that because it leads to the concept the author calls digital autophagy. Autophagy literally translates to self-eating.
In biology, it's a process where a cell consumes its own damaged parts. But applied to AI, it is a terrifying concept.
It is the ultimate existential threat to creativity. Generative AI models are trained by scraping the internet for human-created content.
But now that these models are generating vast amounts of text and images, they are increasingly scraping the internet and ingesting their own AI-generated outputs as training data.
I want to give you, the listener, a vivid mental simulation of what this means. Imagine you paint a beautiful, vibrant, chaotic masterpiece. You put it in a highly advanced photocopier, and it spits out a pretty good copy. Then you put the copy back into the machine, and you copy the copy. You do this 10,000 times. Eventually, all the sharp lines, the weird brushstrokes, the unique flaws, they all blur together.
The machine averages everything out until it just spits out a dull, uniform gray square.
That is what AI is currently doing to human thought and human romance. It forms these recursive loops where thought becomes smoother, safer, and more brutally average with every single iteration.
It is a system devouring itself, producing not intelligence, but massive, automated conformity.
Think about this in the context of Professor Merriwell's high visual recurrence index. The problem isn't just that couples on Instagram are conforming to a beige aesthetic. The problem is that the entire digital infrastructure we rely on is optimizing for beige.
The algorithm learns that the beige format gets engagement, so it shows more of it, so more people copy it, so the AI trains on more of it.
We are drowning in an inescapable echo chamber of smoothed-out mediocrity, where the mathematical probability of the next logical word or the next logical image completely dictates human expression.
So if we are trapped in this loop of digital autophagy, what is the solution? Does the mouse-colored cat offer a way out?
The author proposes an active, aggressive antidote called capacitivism. Capacitivism is not about throwing your computer in the trash and moving to the woods.
Right. It is the act of deliberately injecting friction into the circuit. It is about intentionally overloading the digital photocopy machine. You don't reject the digital tools, you force them to process the impossible.
That brings everything full circle. Is pairing Taylor Swift with a 20th century French philosopher basically an act of rebellion against the algorithm? Is it throwing a wrench into the machine?
That is exactly what it is. The author states that an AI can organize perfectly, but it cannot dare. A machine can effortlessly summarize Roland Barthes' life, and a machine can cleanly analyze the lyrical structure of the 1989 album.
But an algorithm, relying on probability, has absolutely no training data for the concept of Wittgenstein in a slammed door or Deleuze and lipstick.
Because there is no mathematical probability that those concepts belong together. It defies logic.
Precisely. The AI wants the smooth, predictable, highly probable path. It wants to pair Taylor Swift with other pop stars and Barthes with other French theorists.
The conceptual leap, the forced collision of completely unrelated universes, is uniquely human. The author calls this act intellectual vandalism.
Intellectual vandalism. It implies breaking the pristine, mathematically perfect window of the algorithm just to see what the jagged edges look like.
The human mind creates the spark by forcing the collision. The author concludes the book by defining the citizen of tomorrow.
The sovereign citizen of the future is not someone who passively consumes the perfectly curated, AI-generated flow of information.
The sovereign citizen is the one who bends the flow, who actively disturbs its logic. Sovereignty isn't about owning the data, it's about disrupting the data's predictable trajectory.
The cat has taken the color of the mouse. It has entered the machine. The author, Yusio Ju, hasn't just written a book about philosophy and pop music.
They have used the AI itself to build a conceptual architecture that the AI would never, ever have the audacity, the humor, or the fundamental human weirdness to conceive on its own.
Okay, let's take a breath and bring this all together. What an absolute journey this has been. We started this deep dive by examining how society snobbishly dismisses pop music as shallow, frictionless entertainment.
But by looking through the incredibly inventive, disruptive lens of this book, we realized that a pop song like Style might actually be the most potent, universally understood philosophical text we have right now.
It is powerful precisely because it utilizes the formats and the signs, the white t-shirts, the red lips, that we all instinctively inherited and instantly understand.
We learned from Roland Barthes that the intensity of our feelings is entirely real, but the vocabulary we use to express them is always a quotation.
We learned from Professor Merriwell's biting satire that human beings will often prioritize maintaining the visual legibility of a relationship over the messy emotional reality of the relationship itself.
And we learned from Heraclitus driving the Uber that while we try desperately to freeze time by repeating the image, the river of time keeps flowing, changing us entirely.
Whether you consider yourself a diehard Swiftie, a dedicated student of mid-century French philosophy, or just someone trying to survive the highly curated, format-driven madness of modern dating, understanding the mechanics of the image gives you back a little bit of your agency.
You can still wear the white t-shirt,
Yeah.
you can still quote the rom-com, you can still sing the bridge at the top of your lungs.
But you can do it with your eyes wide open. You are no longer just a passive consumer of the myth. You are aware of the watchmaker's gears turning beneath the surface.
And perhaps most importantly, you are aware of the vital importance of intellectual vandalism, of not letting the algorithm smooth out your edges, dictate your associations, or trap you in a recursive loop of beige conformity.
Exactly. You have to introduce the friction. So I want to leave you, the listener, with a final extrapolated thought to mull over tonight, something that builds on everything we've just unpacked, but projects it into our immediate future.
We're ready for it.
We discussed at length how Barthes argues that we, quote, our feelings from past movies, books, and songs. Our grandest declarations of love are inherited scripts written by other humans.
Right.
And we also just discussed how AI is currently locked in a terrifying loop of digital autophagy, feeding on its own outputs, endlessly generating and mass-producing content based on those exact same old scripts, smoothing away all the human friction.
That's the reality we're in.
So here's the question I want you to sit with tonight. If love is just a language we inherit, and the machines are now fully in charge of mass-producing and mathematically smoothing out that language, when we fall in love 10 years from now, whose script will we actually be quoting, a human's or an algorithm's?
That is a chilling thought.
Keep bending the logic of the flow. Keep throwing wrenches into the machine. Look for the hidden Easter eggs in your own life. And whatever you do, don't let the algorithm write your next bridge. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.